So anyway, Kodo Sawaki was a leading figure in the world of Zen. By the way, he was born in June 16th, 1880, and he passed the December 21st, 1965. So a little bit before our time in some respects. So wonderful individual, and as you will begin to see as we talk further. But Kodo Sawaki was a leading figure in the world of Zen. Though he was very down to earth, no nonsense, straight to the point Zen teacher. He helped popularize Zen during his career and make it more available outside the monasteries. He was also very instrumental in promoting the tradition of students sewing their own vestments, their okesa, etc., to support their practice. He's very well known for this, and we'll talk more about this as we go along. The name Homeless Kodo comes from Kodo Sawaki's life of constant traveling and teaching from temple to temple, yet never wavering in his efforts to clarify the Buddha way. I would like to start with a couple of quotes from him that help reveal his teaching approach and insight. This is the first one. To practice the Buddha way is not to let your minds wander, but to become one with what you're doing. Become one with what you're doing. This is called zanmai or samadhi. You know, we often hear and talk about samadhi, being one with what you are doing. And shikan, which we know from Dogen, shikantaza. And so this is, you know, I think very indicative of his down-to-earth, pragmatic. Zen practice is about jumping into what we are doing right now, always. The second one I want to just share at the front is we human beings always have calcified ideas. To believe some kind of ism means we're addicted to particular ideas. Because of such fixed views, we cannot see the Buddha Dharma. Reality, which is reality, even though it's very close to us. All thoughts are based on solidified views. Buddha Dharma is prior to such views being formed. So I think this is a wonderful, you know, we talk about letting go of self-centeredness in our practice, letting go of all this calcification, and allow our innate nature, which comes before it, to reveal itself. So I really like those two quotes very much. So today I'm going to be drawing from two sources primarily. This is a little book of To You is what it's called, and it's Zen Sayings of Kodo Sawaki, just a little book. And this is what we studied earlier in the year in our Tuesday night Dharma study from January through April, which is the Zen Teachings of Homeless Kodo. A very, very nice book. It not only starts with the things that Kodo Sawaki said, it is amplified and clarified by Uchiyama and also Okumura. So we hear from all three sources from this book, and I'll share some things from this in just a few minutes. Okay, so let's see. So let me share with you, first of all, just a little bit of his background and history to help us understand him more deeply. Kodo Sawaki was born in Japan, in Tsu, the town of Tsu, in Mie Prefecture. Now it's M-I-E Prefecture, in 1880. This is located just south of Tokyo, just a little bit south of Tokyo, to help everybody understand where that is. And when he was born, he was given the name Shikichi. He was one of 6 children. And let's see. He was born to Sutaro and Shige Tada. And when he was 4 years old, his mother died. And when he was 7 years old, his father died suddenly of a heart attack. So you can see already he's getting quite a sense of impermanence. At this time, he went to live. Oh, and by the way, when his father died, 3 of his siblings had already passed. So I don't know any details about this, but there was a lot of people passing in his early childhood that he experienced. He went to live with his Aunt Hino, and 6 months later, Hino's husband died. So she could not take care of him by herself. So ultimately, Kodo Sawaki, he was then adopted by Bankichi Sawaki. So this is where he gets his last name. He was adopted, and Bankichi was a lantern maker. That was his business. But in reality, he was a gambler. His stepmother was a former prostitute, and they lived in the red light district in that community. During his grade school years, he experienced unsavory conditions, selfishness, hedonistic or self-centered seeking behavior. He also learned through this to be stronger and how to survive. And fortunately, he became acquainted with a nearby family who was able to learn and study Chinese and Japanese history and literature. So he got some exposure to things more outside the chaos of his early growing up. After he finished primary school, he began questioning his future. Finally, at the age of 16, he ran away from home. He had, it is said, he had 3 kilos, I'm not quite sure how big 3 kilos is, but 3 kilos of rice, like raw rice. And he started a trip from just south of Tokyo to Eiheiji. And if you know, that's crossing the big island. So it's quite a long trip to take. And he wanted to become a monk when he got there. And he didn't have a sponsor. Back in those days, and I think it's probably still very true today, you need to have a sponsor. You need to have a priest who will sponsor you. In other words, they will ordain you and will help you move down the path, the Zen formal path. And he did not have that, but he was taken in as an assistant at the workshop. So he did odd jobs at Eiheiji at the age of 16. Isn't that interesting? And so I'd like to borrow from this book and just tell you a little more about his life. And I'd like to pick it up right there. This also explains a bit of an experience he had. At one point, he had a day off and decided to go do zazen in his own room. By chance, an old practitioner who helped out at the temple entered the room and bowed toward him respectfully, as if he were the Buddha himself. This old woman usually just ordered him around like an errand boy, So what was it that moved her to bow toward him with such respect? This was the first time that Sawaki Roshi realized what noble dignity was inherent in the Zazen posture. He resolved to practice Zazen for the rest of his life. In his old age, Sawaki Roshi often said that he was a man who wasted his entire life with Zazen. The point of departure for this way of life lay in this early event. Due to various circumstances, he was to become a monk that was finally granted. He was ordained in Shoshinji, a distant, quite a ways away. At the age of 19, he entered Intsuchi in Tada as a trainee monk, but only stayed for a fortnight. Fortnight's 14 days. I had to look that up myself. From there, he was sent to another temple in which he met Ryuon Feioke Roshi. They understood each other well, and Sawaki resolved to follow him. Feioke Roshi had studied for years under Bozuzan Zenji, a great Zen master of the Meiji era, which was from 1868 to 1912. And the longer they were together, the more Sawaki Roshi was attached to his straightforward character. Sawaki Roshi heard lectures from him, which formed the basis of his later practice of shikantaza, just sitting. Following that, Sawaki was drafted as a soldier in the Japanese-Russian War, which broke out in 1904 and earned a gold medal. At the age of 26, in the year 1906, he returned to Japan after the war. Rather late for his age, he entered the Academy for Buddhist Studies in his hometown, from which he transferred to the seminar at Horyuji in Nara, where he studied Yogacara philosophy under the Abbot Joen Sojo. At the age of 34, after having obtained his overview of Buddhist training, he began to practice Zazen alone from morning till night at Jofukuji, an empty temple in Nara. So it was an empty temple, abandoned temple. He went there and he dived completely into shikantaza. Here, shikantaza penetrated his flesh and blood. In 1916, when he was 36, Soto Roshi recruited him as a teacher for the monks at Daijiji in Hijo. After Oka Roshi's death, Sawaki Roshi lived alone at Mission Mountain in Kumamoto. And with this as his base, he began travel through all parts of Japan to give instructions on Zazen and hold lectures. When he was 55, he was appointed professor. So you can see that was quite a number of years, maybe a couple of decades, that was his home base, and he just traveled around Japan, all over Japan, and gave lectures, taught Zazen. And so when he was 55, he was appointed professor at Kanazawa University. At the same time, he became Kodo, a head teacher at Sojiji, one of the training temples in our Soto Zen sect. This began the period of Sawaki Roshi's greatest activity. At that time, Zen didn't mean much more than koan Zen. So take this in. This is really interesting. This would have been in, we're talking about the 40s, maybe early 50s. Zen didn't mean much more than koan Zen of the Rinzai school. But Sawaki Roshi concentrated entirely on Shikantaza as it had been taught by Dogen Zenji. Looking at the history of Japanese Buddhism, it cannot be overlooked that Sawaki Roshi was the first in our era to reintroduce Shikantaza in its pure form and revive it to being equally valid to Koan Zen. Isn't that interesting? Because he never lived in his own temple and also did not write any books, people began to call him Homeless Kodo. Yet in 1963, he lost the strength in his legs and he had to give up traveling. He entered Antaiji, where he lived where he died in 1965 at the age of 85. So Antaiji is where, of course, he meets Sawaki. He meets Uchiyama. So anyway, that's just a brief overview of his biography. There are a number of biographies of him in some of his books. If you Google Kodo Sawaki, you'll find a number of publications that have come out recently. I would say, maybe 4 or 5 that are quite good. So anyway, you can kind of see where he comes from, right? And I think doesn't that tell us a lot about who he is? A very earthy, serious, insightful. We'll see some of his insight as I move along. So what I'd like to do next is I'd like to draw a few things from this book. What we contain here is really a lot of his thoughts, and some of it's kind of short and sweet with elaborations from, as I said, Uchiyama and Okumura. But I'm going to focus primarily on what Kodo Sawaki says, and I'll let you know when somebody else is saying this so that it's more clear for you. But one time, as an introduction in this book, Uchiyama is comparing himself to Homeless Kodo, to Kodo Sawaki. And here's what he had to say. As many people know, Kodo Sawaki was like a typical ancient Zen master, dynamic, fearless, and unconventional. It's rare to see teachers like him these days. I am, on the contrary, such an faint-hearted person that I hesitate to tell people I was his disciple. Yet I practiced with him longer than anyone and served as his closest disciple. Near the end of his life, I asked him, I am such a weak person. Is it possible for me to lead people after your death? He replied, in our tradition, Zazen is the most honored one. As long as you continue to practice Zazen, you can lead people without mistake. He encouraged his cowardly disciple and showed me the path to take. I received this as his final teaching. Since then, I have devoted myself entirely to Zazen and have maintained Antaiji as a place where the practice of Zazen is most honored. So Uchiyama, those of you who know him, he was always really wonderful at not putting on airs. He would be very humble, but through that humility, you could see great strength. So then I'd like to go through, I'm going to cover a few of the topics that are brought up. Just we're not going to go into much detail, but I think it's going to have an impact on you. So I'm going to try to share this with you. I'll go through as many as we can that I've prepared. So this first one that I want to talk about is seeing with fresh eyes. This is what it's called. And here's what Kodo Sawaki had to say. When you steal others' belongings, you become a thief. This is very simple and clear, but people today think one becomes a criminal only after being arrested by a policeman, investigated by a prosecutor, sentenced by a judge, and confined to prison. Therefore, corrupt politicians think they are men of virtue and skill if they can cover up their deeds and escape getting caught. They are heavily influenced by group stupidity. He likes this. He talks about this a great deal. He says, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, and Hitler and Mussolini were nothing but great thieves. We're always falling into ruts, he says. Politicians and their followers and opinion leaders work hard to manipulate people into biased, habitual ways of thinking. The ways we're distorted are subtle, deliberate, and complicated. When we're liberated from this distortion, we will find the true wisdom of Buddhism. So I couldn't help but share the relevance of this with you. So that's the first one. Then I want to go to another one. It's called Returning to Self. And so Kodo Sawaki says, we cannot exchange, let me stop, let me go here. Each and every one of us has to live out our life. Each and every one of us. Let's break it down, each of us. Each one of us has to live out our lives. Who's better looking? Who's smarter? You or I? We don't need to be compared with each other. We need to live out our lives. This is what Kodo Sawaki is saying. Uchiyama adds to this, and here's what he said. Kodo Sawaki spent his entire life devoted to Zazen. What is this Zazen that he expounded? In his early days, he often said, Zazen is selfing the self. You know, this is a really interesting expression. If you've not heard it before, when we are sitting in Zazen, it's we are sitting with ourselves and we are looking at ourselves, and this is the self selfing the self. And so this is a classic Kodo Sawaki expression. To practice Zazen is to be intimate with the self. In short, in our daily lives, we always worry about our relations with others, and we're absorbed in competition with them. To practice Zazen is to let go of these comparisons and just sit, being the self that is only the self. Allowing ourselves to be the self that is only the self. And so let's continue. Here's another one that I want to go to next. Okay, another one. This is also on group stupidity. We're always caught up in following the crowd. This is what group stupidity is, in another way of saying it. Group stupidity is relevant today. This is Kodo Sawaki. When people are alone, they're not so bad. However, when a group forms, paralysis occurs. People become totally foolish and cannot distinguish good from bad. Their minds are numbed by the group. Because of their desire to belong and even to lose themselves. Some even pay membership dues. Others work on advertising to attract people and intoxicate them with political, spiritual, or commercial purposes. I keep some distance from society, not to escape it, but to avoid this kind of paralysis. To practice Zazen is to become free of this group stupidity. So just kind of bear with me here. I'm going to continue to share a few things this way, and just kind of let Kodo Sawaki's words just kind of flow down over you. Don't be thinking about it too much, but I think it will be for good purpose. Here's another one, tunnel vision. This is another issue that Kodo Sawaki wanted to express. The karmic consciousness of human beings are not the same. Each of us has our own limited view. We each see the world only through our particular tunnel, because we interact while holding our own way of viewing, thinking, and doing. Friction occurs in the world because we have our opinions. This is where the friction and where the suffering, we can say, comes in this world. And Uchiyama just adds this. Usually we think we are most important, and we believe our thoughts are the most reliable yardsticks for judging. We use this stick for gauging circumstances and other people's actions. When their behavior or the situation is not in accord with our standards, we get angry, have conflicts, and are troubled. Okay, so just basics. This is basics. This is the clarity that I think our Zen practice helps us see our human condition in. Let me go to another one. Okay, religion in life. This is the next one. Kodo Sawaki simply says, how we live everyday lives has to be the main concern of religion. You know, think about religion and the history of our experience with religion. It's often lofty and, oh my gosh, people over there, this person did that. Kodo Sawaki is saying, no, religion, the main concern of religion has to be our everyday life right now. And so this is where Zen is extremely relevant. Kodo Sawaki goes on and says, religion is to live out every fresh self, which is not deceived by anything. Religion must not be a system of dogma. Religion is life. Religion has to function as life. Worshipping sutras is not enough. Religion must manifest itself freely, inexhaustibly, in all activities of life, everywhere, always. So really continuing in that theme. Here's one that's called My Opinion. And I wanted to share this with you. My opinion. Everyone reads the newspaper in a different order. One person reads, this is Kodo Sawaki. Another person turns first to the sports or to serialized novels or political column. We're all different because we see things through our individual discriminating consciousness, grasping things with our thoughts. We each behave differently. When we stop perceiving with our illusory discriminating consciousness, we can experience the world that we share. The true reality isn't something we see from our individual perspective. Therefore, human beings make mistakes despite careful thinking. Besides, in fact, careful thinking, I think sometimes lead us in the wrong direction. Uchiyama adds this, he says, because we have eyes and brains, we can't stop seeing and thinking. However, I hope we understand that the world we see and the things we think are merely stories generated in our heads. We must be careful not to cause serious problems by being turned around by our thoughts. Zazen is a posture that enables us to see through the illusions of our thinking selves. And Kodo Sawaki says further, people often say, in my opinion, when they say something, in my opinion, he says, your opinion is no good. So keep your mouth shut. This is Kodo Sawaki being very candid. So let's see, please bear with me. I hope this is working somewhat for you all. I want to hit a couple more before I move to something different. This is one I really am very fond of. This is called Zazen is good for nothing. Yes. What is Zazen good for? He says, nothing. We should be made to hear this good for nothingness so often that we get calluses on our ears, and practice good for nothing Zazen without expectations. Otherwise, our practice really is good for nothing. So the idea that we are gaining things from our Zazen practice, this is what Kodo Sawaki is dispelling. We're not gaining anything. We're actually letting go. We're letting go of all of our superfluous calcification, allowing our true nature to arise. This is why it's good for nothing. We're letting go. So it's something he's quite known for. And he says further on, he says, each of us has our own particular karmic attributes, but it's important that we're all like the Buddha, Shinjin Datsuraku, dropping off body and mind, means that we discard our stubborn self-centeredness, trust the Buddha teaching, and walk by following the Buddha. So let's see, how are we doing for time? Okay. I think, what do I have, another half hour? I think.
20 minutes.
I think, there's a few other things I wanted to say here, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of what's in this book. This goes on, and rather than take more of our time with this, I'd like to share with you something else that I think is of equal value that I wanted to cover. One of the things that I thought was very poignant, and I'm just going to speak about this, I'm not going to read it to you from the book, but he says the self that is connected to the universe. This expression, I think, so captures our Zazen practice, because we talk about we're interdependent. How do we exist? Do we exist or don't we exist? This is the question. And it's not a very good question. We neither exist nor not exist. We exist interdependently. This is how we inter-are with each other. And so when we sit in Zazen, we are practicing with the universe, with all things. This is something we should very much keep in mind. So now I'd like to, there was a couple of things written. One of these was by Uchiyama after Kodo Sawaki died. And I found this really, really interesting. And it's really, the title of this talk is Kodo Sawaki Zazen. So I thought I would share just a couple of things from this today. And let me start here. In my late 20s, and this is Uchiyama speaking. In my late 20s, when I read Jisho Zanmai, and this is Jizo Zanmai is a fascicle of Dogen, and it means the samadhi as self-experience. So our Zazen samadhi as self-experience. He says, once I read that, I decided to leave home and become a monk. I understood that if I lived based only on my thinking, my life would continue to be childish and unenlightened. Since ancient times, there have been people who have sought the self in its true sense. Unless I wholeheartedly practiced with such a person, one who had truly and completely pursued clarifying the self, I would never be able to understand my true self. When I realized this, when I reached this conclusion, I finally made up my mind to become a monk and practice Zen. In response to my decision, my father said, "You are a critical and argumentative person. It's not good to follow a mediocre teacher." And he tried to find a good teacher for me. Finally, he recommended Sawaki Roshi, who was then the officer in charge of instructing monks at Sojiji. He told me to go there if I thought Sawaki Roshi was a good teacher, to ask him to be a disciple. This was the first time I encountered a person when he went there. This was the first time he encountered a person who spoke clearly about the self for which I had been searching. Although I had listened to many lectures on Buddhism and Christianity, those talks had nothing to do with the self. Sawaki Roshi talked about the self, starting only from the self, and I eagerly took notes. When I went home, I summarized his teachings according to my notes. And here's his summary. This is Uchiyama's summary of Kodo Sawako's talk. The Buddha Dharma teaches, this is number one, the Buddha Dharma teaches that this life is our true and final refuge. To practice Zazen is to become transparent, to become the transparent self. Number three, to practice Zazen is the self-selfing the self by the self. To practice Zazen is to become the self that is connected with the universe. And number five, Zazen is good for nothing. And so even though I wrote these before becoming a monk, when I knew nothing of Zazen, but had only heard Sawaki Roshi's lecture for the first time, I think they're a pretty good summary. I surprised myself. Although I had tentatively made up my mind to become a monk, part of me didn't really want to. I didn't know what kind of physical and mental experiences I would have to go through as a monk. So deep in my mind, I wanted to avoid it. Isn't this being real? Yet after hearing Sawaki Roshi's teaching, I couldn't avoid it anymore. I'd reached the point where I felt that if I wanted to live based on the truth of life, I couldn't escape, so I was ordained. So that's one thing I wanted to share here. The other is something that is from this same talk that he wrote. And so again, this is from Kodo Sawaki Zazen. And it starts this way. I'm jumping in the middle here, but it starts like this. Everyone smiles when their desires are fulfilled and complains when things don't go as they wish. Even when we're physically mature, humans tend to be childish, always hungry and wanting more. Spiritually, we never evolve beyond this condition. A person who's only physical mature is a fake adult. To be a Buddha is to be a mature human instead of a phony adult like a hungry ghost. Being a Buddhist is not something special. Dogen Zenji made this clear in Shobogenzo many times in his fascicle, 8 Aspects of Great Beings Awakening. Sawaki Roshi saying that Zen is the posture of being connected with the universe is the same. Practice as taught by Dogen Zenji is simply becoming an adult in the true meaning of the word. In short, Zazen is to stop doing, to face the wall and sit, just being the self that is only the self. In Zazen, we should refrain from doing anything else. Yet being human, we begin to think things. Then we begin to converse and interact with these things, with our thoughts. If you're a stockbroker, you might think, I should have sold the shares. Then, number one, no, I should have bought it. I should have waited, and on and on. If you are a young lover, you might find your girlfriend appears to your mind at all times. If you're a mother who doesn't get along with her daughter-in-law, you might think only of your son's wife. In Zazen, while you're supposed to be doing nothing, things will arise of their own accord in relation to whatever life situations we're in. And yet when you realize you're thinking and return to just sitting, the thoughts that appeared to you like images on a TV suddenly disappear, as if you have switched the television off. Only the wall is left in front of you. For an instant, that is. Then thoughts arise. You return to Zazen and they vanish. We simply repeat this. Awareness of reality is called kakashoku. This is Zazen. The most important point is to keep repeating this kakashoku, coming back to the present billions of times. This is how we should practice. If we practice like this, we cannot help but realize our thoughts are nothing but secretions of our brains. Just as our salivary glands secretes saliva and our stomach secretes gastric juices, our brains secrete thoughts. However, usually we don't understand this. When we think, I hate him, we despise that person, forgetting that this is merely a secretion. Hatred occupies our mind. Hatred occupies our mind, but hating, we subordinate ourselves to a tyrant. When we hate, we subordinate ourselves to a tyrant. We've lost control of ourselves. Our true self is being taken over by our emotion. When we love someone, we're swept away by our attachment. We become enslaved by love. In the end, all of us live as serfs to this Lord, our thought. This is the source of our problem. So I think I'll stop right there. And then he goes on, one more thought here. In reality, thoughts arise in our minds are nothing but the scenery of our life. We shouldn't be blind to our unconscious of our scenery. We need to see clearly. Zazen commands a view of everything. In ancient Zen texts, this is called the scenery of the original ground. So it's important to be aware, just not sucked into it. Be aware of what's going on, but objectify and see clearly, and allow yourself to stay present and clear. So let me have a sip of water, but I have one more thing I want to share, and then I'm done. But I know I've given you a lot of information, and I hope it kind of percolates in, and I hope it helps us with our Zen practice these coming days. And I do encourage you to also consider looking up Kodo Sawaki and Uchiyama. So this I want to share with you. This is what I'll finish with. I'd like to express, now let's see, this is a recollection of my teacher from Uchiyama of Kodo Sawaki. So this is just kind of a reflection after his passing. I'd like to express my infinite gratitude to Kodo Sawaki's teachings. I'm determined to cherish his counsel always. I also hope later generations continue his teachings. Viewing Zazen as the most honored one determines our attitude toward our whole lives. What should our outlook be? Here is my best attempt to express what my teacher inscribed in my mind. So these are 7 points that he wanted to make sure everybody gets from Kodo Sawaki. Gaining is delusion, and losing is realization. That's the first. Next, don't try to get any benefits. Don't be greedy. Don't regret losing. Next, never establish, this is really good, okay, so enjoy this one. Never establish an organization. Things achieved by an institution will collapse because of that institution. This rise and fall of accomplishments is nothing other than the transmigration within samsara. This was Sawaki Roshi's fundamental attitude. So this is really how Sawaki Roshi lived. He did not create any institutions or this, that, and the other. Though he worked at Sojiji and this kind of thing. But I found this kind of refreshing, and yes, there's some validity here. Next, teach individuals one by one rather than educating people generally within a system. We need to address each individual individually, since each is unique. So this is really quite wonderful. And as a teacher, I see the efficacy of this very much. And sometimes we have to do things on a large scale, but it is nice to do things one-on-one and help people. The next one, don't ask, this is also very good, by the way. Don't ask for donations. People have the idea that if they're involved in a temple, they'll be asked to donate. This has seriously injured the Buddha Dharma. We never ask for donations. That way people can come without worrying about money. So there you have it. We have to have money to exist, but it can cause problems, okay? So, but I like, very straightforward from Kodo Sawaki. Next one, don't be fickle. Don't act pulled by your self-centered thoughts. Okay, very simple. And I think the last one is, if you're careless, you'll become famous and achieve high position. Isn't that great? If you're careless, you'll become famous and achieve a high position. Make every effort not to rise in the world, particularly after age 40. I'm not sure why. Fame and profit will be tempting. Do not go there. So this was, I think, quite good. And just a few final words. Each of these things, at first glance, sounded straightforward. Yet when you look closely, you'll find they're not the mainstream teachings of the world. Sawaki Roshi not only taught these things, he manifested them in his example. Because I practiced with him intimately for 25 years until his final days, these teachings have been engraved within me. Whenever I encounter trouble, they come to mind. I feel my teacher is still instructing me, and I am deeply grateful. So I will finish with that, and I guess we have a little time left, so that's good. I'm curious as to, I would love to have a little discussion, even though I am not an authority, other than I've done some reading of late, and I'm very fond, but I would love to hear people's thoughts. What struck you about this coming from Kodo Sawaki and Uchiyama? Okumura is also very prevalent in that book in explaining, but he was only supporting the other two teachers. He said this. He says, I don't want to be jumping in the middle. I want you to hear my two teachers ahead of me. But he would clarify a few things in the book as well.
Yeah, I can't.
Please raise a hand, make comments. What would you like to say?
Yes.
Somebody, please.
You see, Tessen's hand is up. Chicago.
Tessen, where are you?
We're here.
Tessen, are you wanting to say something? Please do.
Yeah, just
I didn't see your
something
hand.
that, yeah, I thought I did. So thank you so much for sharing this. This kind of, I think so much of what we're hearing is just such a clear way of verbalizing what our experience is when we sit and when we do zazen. And the gems that you've picked out really help to reinforce what we do. And I thank you very much for that. Something that struck me is, this may be general knowledge, I'm not sure, but as we found out when we were in Japan, that Sawaki Roshi was Matsuoka Roshi's teacher, his meditation teacher at Komazawa. So as you were going through all that, the different places that he had been and had taught, as I recall, that is what we were told.
Yeah. Let me just say something about that. Actually, Tessen, we've really noodled that some more. We've looked into that more, and we think that is not true now.
Wait a minute, Zenku, wait a minute.
We think that they're going to miss each other, and Roshi would like to say something about that. Please jump in.
Yeah, I don't think that's what Tessen was saying. He said that Kodo Sawaki was Matsuoka's teacher. He was not saying that Matsuoka and Uchiyama were both at Komazawa. Uchiyama, as Okumura explained to us, Uchiyama never went to Komazawa. But that doesn't mean that Matsuoka was not practicing under Kodo Sawaki. That's what Tessen said.
Right, and that's what I was responding to, Roshi. We've looked at that, and the dates that Matsuoka Roshi was there were not the same dates that Kodo Sawaki was teaching at Kamizawa University. I realize that's right? A different question than you brought up the other day, but it's also true that they didn't spend time there together.
I did not see that. I did not see that information. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that Matsuoka Roshi carried the same emphasis on zazen to America.
Yes. Yeah. What I find so interesting is, as we're saying, is that what we have gotten from Matsuoka Roshi, and consequently what I have gotten from Kongo Roshi, this emphasis, very strong zazen practice. This is the core of our teaching. We can see that Kodo Sawaki Uchiyama, Okumura. It's such a wonderful blending of our two lineages as we are so in sync on what's important, what's really important in our Zen practice. I was really struck when there was comments about at one time Zen was thought only as koan practice. And you know what I take from that, and this is just my opinion, by the way, and so take it for what it's worth, but I think that as we know from various sources, when we went to Japan, as Tessen was mentioning, we got this information that, and Matsuoka Roshi would express it, that there was a decline in the vitality of Zen practice in Japan leading up to this kind of renaissance, we could say, of Zen Buddhism becoming more popular worldwide. And Matsuoka Roshi would go to Japan on a trip and communicate what's going on in the United States. And he was kind of an ambassador helping relations between the two countries after World War II. And he would come back and bluntly say things like, Zen is dead in Japan, dead. People are, the priests are waiting for people to die, only ready to do ceremonies for funerals. And it was shocking to hear him say that, and I tried not to believe it all, and but I think you're just hearing some of the frustration from Matsuoka Roshi when he says it that bleakly. But obviously there was a decline, and Kodo Sawaki, it was nice to know that Kodo Sawaki was one of the early people in the 20th century that saw this and really helped reinvigorate the true Zazen practice of Dogen. And I think this is also with the advent of Zen going worldwide, and this has inspired Japan in many ways also to return to the roots and emphasize, Zen training and Zen practice. So anyway, I found that very interesting. And let's see, I saw Katsuryu's hand, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Zenku, for your talk very much. I was struck by a couple of things. Most importantly, the definition of samadhi that you gave, which is to become one with what you are doing, that I have wondered about samadhi. I've read various definitions of it. I've probably heard this before, but it really has struck me that our practice, even here, it isn't just zazen. We're to do it everywhere in all situations, which so we're not in like this little silo, trying to get good or trying to achieve something before we go into the world. We are in the world. We have responsibilities, and that those responsibilities and so forth can be our samadhi. They can be our practice. Do you have anything additional you'd like to say about samadhi? Or thank you very much for your
Great. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I think that is really very special also. I think you said it very well, Katsuryu, but it's like, being totally aware of this moment and being aware of this moment. And it means what are all of my senses telling me? What is my monkey mind telling me? Be aware of this, but be grounded in the present. Be informed by this, but don't be dictated by this. This is samadhi, and we train ourselves, we learn how to do this to the best of our ability in our Zazen practice, and we get better over time. If we practice daily, over time it gets stronger, And as the decades go by, we get stronger. And so this is wonderful. But I like to say it also, when you're sitting in Zazen, okay, be aware. This is one way of saying it. But I would say, be aware of your awareness. What is my awareness? And am I aware of it? I think it's almost like double down. Don't just be aware of the things drifting by, in our awareness, but be fully aware of it and let it pass. And what that does, I think, is that really sets our grounding in the present. What is our awareness? I'm aware of what is going on. But anyway, that's what I would say. We can be grounded in our body. We can be grounded in our breath in the present, but we can also be grounded in our awareness in the present. And so that's really, I think that's samadhi, something like that.
Thank you,
Other
Sensei.
comments? Yes, Kuo-san.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your talk. You were talking about being aware of our awareness, and you mentioned that word kakushoku. Is that the correct word? Kakushoku.
Hakushoku, yes.
Okay, yeah. We've gone through this book many times, and I feel like I'm just now at the point where something is sticking. And when he talked about kakushoku, and you said, let these things come, whether on the cushion or in our life, but don't grab on to our awareness or anything. And I think in that paragraph, he said, let it come, realize it's there, and thoughts come in again, and repeat this. And he said, repeat it 1 billion times. I thought the fact that he used 1 billion as the number kind of gave me some confidence. So that's the thing that I love the most about this book. So thank you.
Yes. And it means be relentless, no matter how many times, countless times. The work is always the same. It's always coming back to our awareness. Yeah. Sangak, good morning to you. I think yes, I see your hand. Please talk to us.
Good morning to you, Zenku-san. Good to see you. Thank you very much for your talk, and kind of following up on several things here, but Katsuyu kind of set the tone for me with samadhi. We've often gone back to both. We've gone to Dogen, we've gone to Matsuoka Roshi, we've gone to Sawaki, and with the idea that certainly in the 13th century and then again in the 20th century, the idea that Zen was dead. And you said something that just struck my ear. Swaki Roshi said that Zen was dead when it was only koan. When koan study was the representation of Zen. Yet when he said that we should be grounded in Zazen, but then we say in Samadhi that it's just not sitting and just not doing koans, but rather it is to be fully in self-awareness of what is going on right in front of us. And then I thought that really fits Matsuoka Roshi's idea of Zen in everyday life. I mean, in essence, you're saying Zen is everyday life in some ways. So I'd certainly like your comments on kind of that conundrum there of koan and zazen. But Zen in everyday life seems to use both of those, but transcends them in a way that Swaki Roshi emphasized. Your thoughts on that?
Great. Thank you, Sangak. Appreciate those comments. And I was thinking when you were saying, it's like koan. Obviously the Buddha taught. There were no koans around when he taught, and so the beginning of our practice was about awareness and being, calming the mind, so that we could settle more and more and wake up to the reality of who we really are. This kind of an idea. When this philosophy went to China, yes, over time, our koan collections abound with wonderful stories from the Chan period, the Tang Dynasty and a little beyond. And we have quite a lot of collections. Well, and then what happened was some teachers decided that studying the wisdom of other teachers that were collected in these koans were a wonderful way to train students and help them in their awakening process. And so on the surface of it, I think they're, we won't go into motive here, but the thing of it is, what happens though is it's hard to do that and then not have a gaining idea about, okay, I am studying this practice and I'm going to study these koans and I'm going to create it. I'm going to have an understanding. I'm going to have an awakening because of this. This is what I'm doing. I'm doing this to gain this. And so that really has a way of, if that's all Zen becomes, and it may be to the common people, that's what they hear about most. Remember when Buddhism, when Zen first came to this country, it was Rinzai Zen that came first, and we read about it, and oh my gosh, all the amazing stories about this, that, and the other. And Soto Zen came a little later, it kind of snuck in. I'm just kidding about the snuck in, but it came a little bit later, and but that's the true Zen, And I know I'm a little bit rambling, but to try to come back to what I really want to say is that koan, now in Soto Zen, the foundation is shikantaza, sitting in zazen and being present, being aware of our awareness. And but nonetheless, I practice, I read koans with students and I think I encourage people to read koans because I do think there are insights to be gained by reading through them and studying them, but not to make them a core piece of my zazen, not to make my zazen practice dwelling on this koan, whether I'm thinking about it or whether it's on my mind. This is, obviously Rinzai practice, this is still what they use for good purpose. And I'm not criticizing that really. I'm just really enhancing and saying that Soto Zen is different, a little bit different than that, in that we are looking at this moment always, and what is my experience and what am I doing about it? Or maybe what am I not doing about it? This kind of thing. So, but it really good. And yes, of course, Matsuoka Roshi, sometimes when I'm reading Kodo Sawaki, I feel like I'm reading Matsuoka Roshi also. They are very similar, philosophy and direct teaching.
So Susan's hand, go
Other
up,
comments?
Susan.
Please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you. Yes, Susan, please.
What you were just saying about koan study, that was my first experience with Zen, and I stuck with it despite the fact I found the sort of competitive nature of koans to be kind of an impediment. But the main thing I wanted to kind of mention is that thing about samadhi being what you are doing. And I happen to be in a situation now with my family, and I'm having to do stuff I was never trained to do, but it's stuff that needs to be done, and I have to really focus. And they're real simple, kind of unimportant seeming things, but they're necessary. And I have been really focused on, this stuff, doing dishes and, chopping onion, that kind of stuff. And it was sort of gratifying to hear that, because it has felt like it was really being absorbed into my Zen practice. And now to hear you say that's actually samadhi, I think it's kind of nice to know that there's a real name for that. So that was real helpful to me. Thank you very, very much.
That's great. That's great. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Yes, is
There
there?
we had a query in the chat from John Hemmon. Zenku, maybe you could type in the name and author of the book that you referred to, both books, I guess. John Hemmon is asking for the name and author.
Yes, yes, yes. Could I just repeat it also?
Sure.
This is one book. It's a real small little book. It's called To You. That's all it is, and it's the Zen sayings of homeless Kodo. So, oh yeah, since we haven't run out of time, I got to share a couple, and and then I'll go. I won't dwell too much. Okay, so this is one that is wonderful. He says, "You don't seek the way seeks you." Very much reminding me of Kongo Roshi saying, "You're not practicing Zazen. Zazen is practicing you." Very much the same idea. And one other, you say you're seeking the way, but what does it mean if you're seeking the way just to satisfy yourself? Don't have any gaining idea. Don't have any self-centered ideas. But anyway, back to the question. To You, and the author is, do you need the author? It's a difficult name. But if you go to Amazon or something and put up Kodo Sawaki, this book will pop up. And then the book that we had in our Dharma study is the Zen Teachings of Homeless Kodo. And that's by Uchiyama and Okumura Roshi. Other comments, please, anybody?
We have one in the room here.
Yes.
In the Zen Room.
Yes. Great presentation. Something that really struck me was Kodo Sawaki's sense of humor. I don't know if it was intentional, but at least for me, I find it humorous with the contradictions that we at least have with our lives. There's nothing to gain, and that's one of the hardest things that I've had with this Zen practice. Sensei has told me you can't approach Zazen like you would do anything else. Your approach to Zazen has to be completely new. And so I find that contradiction almost humorous with my everyday life. And even the contradictions he's had with his own lineage. Like you said, do not start an organization. It's a huge at least for me, it appears to be a contradiction with what the lineage usually does. I mean, because here we are as an organization, and how I've seen it, to carry the practice, we do have to have some formalities, we have to have some structure. And so, do you see this as a contradiction or an evolution?
Well, I don't see it as really either. I see it more as this is, it's like a cautionary tale. And it's like, okay, we may need to do things, but hey guys, let's remember what we've got here. It's like, don't start an organization and think this is the greatest thing that ever happened. This is the most important thing. No, this is just a means to an end. And I think that Kodo Sawaki definitely lived what he said there. But that doesn't mean that is appropriate for all of us. Sometimes we like to get together, we like to organize. But I think in our organization, I like Kodo Sawaki's words. Probably at the somewhere on the plaque that we have for our organization, you know, have those cautionary tales written on the plaque so that we're kind of keep our feet on the ground and we know what's really important. You know, it's our Zazen practice, and but we like to practice by ourselves. We can do this. We like to help others. You know, we want to help all beings, so we want to sit with other people, and so we want to organize ourselves around that. But just to know that this is not the end in itself. It's not the organization. It's you. What are you doing? What are you doing in this moment? This is what's important. You know, if you lose sight of that, you've lost everything. The baby has gone out with the bathwater. That's what I would say. But so I like what Kodo Sawaki had to say. You can see that he had a very clear perspective. He had a very clear understanding. And so it's really, that's why I wanted to kind of bathe us with his clarity, you know, this morning, and help you all get a little more of a familiar feel with Kodo Sawaki and sort of embrace his temperament and his insight. But any other comments or questions this morning? Really great to see all of you. I think we are just about out of time. And so we could, if we